StrayAllDay.com.
Sorry. So now we have our second speaker. Every time that I look at this man, I'm thinking Miami Heat for some reason. There's something inside of me that's just like the Heat, LeBron's brother, or something like that. So here it is, Dre Baldwin.
All right, so you're probably curious as to what I'm going to talk about tonight. Tonight, my speech is about faking it until you make it. Now, how many of you are familiar with the phrase fake it till you make it? Pretty much everybody, right? Okay. And what I'm going to talk about today is the fact that when you decide to fake it until you make it, the more that you let yourself actually believe it, it becomes very real. It's not fake at all. Now, Friedrich Nietzsche, German, famous German philosopher. Those of you who haven't heard of him, you probably have heard of his famous quote, "That which does not kill us makes us stronger." Any of you familiar with that phrase? All right, you heard the Kanye West song and all that, right? All right. Now, another idea that Nietzsche is credited with is the idea of perspectivism. And the idea of perspectivism is all knowledge is fluid, all knowledge is contingent. As we acquire new knowledge, as we encounter different circumstances, and we all perceive the same information different ways individually, we reassess the rules, we reassess our knowledge based on this new information. For example, how many of you when you were young had your parent ever say to you, "If you behave today, I'll take you to McDonald's for a Happy Meal"? A lot of you, right? Well, back then the perspective was what? Your child's good, you get them something good, which is a McDonald's Happy Meal. Now, I'm 32 years old now, don't have any children, but if I did, my perspective is a little bit different. I don't think fast food would be good for my child, so I wouldn't take him to McDonald's for a Happy Meal. I have new information, I have new knowledge, a different perspective. Another story is my grandmother. Her name's Vicky. And when I was really young, she had a magnet on her refrigerator that said, "Vicky, stick to your diet." When you open the refrigerator, you're probably curious as to what was in that refrigerator. You open the refrigerator, there was a 12-pack of Diet Coke. Now remember, this is the late 80s, early 90s. Back then, what did we get introduced to? Diet soda, low-fat potato chips, zero-calorie Twinkies. And what did we think? We said, this is great. All the junk food that I love, I can still eat it and be healthy at the same time. It's perfect, right? 25 years later, what happened? We got some new information. We got some new knowledge, we got a new perspective. What do we know now? It's the same junk that it always was. It just put a different name on it. New perspectives. Now, all of you sitting here, you're probably curious, Dre, okay, this is all fine and good, this is great information, but what the hell does this have to do with faking it until you make it? So let me explain. Christopher Columbus, we all know him, right? He's the guy who discovered America. I use quotation marks because that's a different speech for a different day. But people want to know how he did that. How did he do it? Christopher Columbus, y'all don't know, he wasn't a sailor, he was a merchant back in Spain. He had never led a group of men before in his life. He didn't even know which direction he was sailing in. If you look at a map of the world, he sailed from Spain. When he landed in America, what did he call the people he saw? Indians. If you look at a map of the world, India is this way, and America is that way. So Christopher Columbus didn't even know where he was going. So how was he able? Well, first of all, he had no qualifications whatsoever. So how was he able to get 3 ships and all those men to sail to the New World? Who funded it and why did they do it? When Christopher Columbus approached Queen Isabella of Spain, he said, "Queen, in addition to the 3 ships you're going to give me, I have 3 demands which must be met. Demand number 1, I want the title of Grand Admiral of the Oceanic Sea." His demand was granted. He said, demand number 2, I want to be named the ruler over all lands which I find in the name of Spain. His demand was granted. Demand number 3, Queen, I want to receive 10% of all commerce from every land that I discover, and I want it to be hereditary and in perpetuity. Now, the Queen said she would grant that demand, but she actually wrote it out in the fine print of the contract that we're not doing that. Had she done that, Christopher Columbus's heirs would be the richest family in the history of the world. Christopher Columbus never read the fine print. He did sign the contract, he did sail, and here we are in the New World. So why did Queen Isabella fund his trip when he had no qualifications? He was a merchant. He had no name. He wasn't highborn. He was nobody. Because when Christopher Columbus approached the Queen and her ministers, he was so overcome with self-belief. He was so confident. He was faking it so strongly that people had no choice but to believe the presentation he showed to them. They didn't know anything else about him. The only thing they knew about Christopher Columbus was the way he presented himself to those people that day. They had to believe it because it was so self-evident. Now I'm going to finish this with one more story. Got a friend of mine named Mike, basketball player. Not related to LeBron, but a basketball player. He's a little bit older than me. He's almost 40 years old. Now, any of you who have ever played a team sport, I know we have a few in here, by the middle or the end of your season in that sport, especially in practice, you are sick of hearing the coach's voice. Because every day in practice, when practice stops, that whistle blows, and that coach is pointing out something that went wrong, you just know he's going to say your name. Philip, why didn't you run faster in that drill? Mark, I want you to go harder. Omar, why are you late? Dre, we need more from you. Be a leader. You just get sick of hearing the coach's voice. So one day in practice, Mike, back in high school, his coach said, you know what, I know y'all tired of hearing me point out what you're doing wrong. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to have each of you be someone else on the team. So for example, let's say I'm the coach and y'all are my basketball team. Today, I'm going to assign each one of you to perform as if you're someone else in the room. And since you're here every day just like I am, you're going to make all the mistakes that they make. All the frustrating things that they do every day, you're going to do them. All the ways that they mess up, I want you to mess up. So that instead of them hearing their mistakes from me, they're going to see it through the eyes of their own teammate. So Omar, all the mistakes that Jaime always makes, I want you to make them today. Jaime, you're going to be Philip. Philip, you're going to be Mark. Mark, you're going to be Simon. Simon, you're going to be Nanette. Nanette, you're going to be Patricia. So each one of you is going to perform as someone else. That day, in practice, this guy Mike. Now mind you, Mike was a marginal player. Sometimes he didn't even get in the game in high school. He didn't even play all the time. But by random choice that day, he was assigned to be the guy who was the best player on the team. So that one day in practice, when Mike had no choice but to fake it as strongly as he possibly could to be the best player in the room, instead of the average player that he normally was, Mike played basketball that day better than he had ever played in his life. And 20 years later, he told me he has never played that well since. Because he had no choice but to fake it until he made it. And in conclusion, when you decide to fake it until you make it, and you truly believe what you're faking, and you really believe it, it is 1,000% real. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dre. Unfortunately, if Omar is going to play me, he's not going to make any mistakes.